All right, folks, I'm going to do a pretty in-depth review of Jack Smith's document and discussion of like Judge Cannon's, ridiculous jury instruction. As you'll see when I get going, I didn't quite have like the camera set up very well, so I'm not really in the frame, but the document is, and you should be able to read it. And in fact, if you're on a mobile device and you go to full screen, like a tablet or a phone, you can touch it and make it even bigger if you want to make the text like easier to read when I'm following along, because I do, highlight some things. And the way I highlight is you can just read the highlighted parts and the sentences will make sense. So enjoy and let me know what you think. All right, it's lawyer time, and this is another episode of Legal Depravity, starring Judge Cannon in the Trump classified documents case, and it just gets better and better. So Jack Smith, filed this document with the court. I'm just calling it the why though document, because what he really is doing here is he's like, all right, Judge, you submitted those ridiculous jury instructions. I want you to really clarify the legal reasoning here. Because let's say it wasn't just some ridiculous mistake and like she actually believes that this is the law. Well, then what Jack Smith's going to want to do is reach out to the Court of Appeals and say, this is the court's legal interpretation of these statutes and it's completely ridiculous and we need you to step in and do something about it. And so that's what this motion is to kind of box her in and admit what she's doing. By the way, some people are wondering, like, what is Judge Cannon doing here? Like, why is she showing so much favoritism to Trump? Is it because she really thinks, he's not guilty, or she's just actually one of those, deluded Trumpers? My personal opinion is this. She knows that one thing about Trump is he rewards absolute loyalty. And Donald Trump could very well win the presidency in the next election. If he does, you can guarantee, if this is what Judge Cannon does, up until the point where she literally is forced to recuse herself by the Court of Appeals, Donald Trump is going to reward her for that. So everyone else, it sends a message to everybody else. So I know what she's thinking. She's thinking Supreme Court. She's thinking, Attorney General or somewhere else in the cabinet. That's what's going on here. I don't think she legitimately believes these are good legal arguments. If she does, and this isn't some, ambition type of thing, then and I've seen some dumb judges in my career, she has to be one of the stupidest. And I'll go into why, okay? So again, this is, I call it the why though, but it's the government's response to the jury instructions, all right? Now, the way I highlighted this, and maybe I'll put a link to the document, is you can just sort of read the highlighted parts and skip the stuff in the beginning, right? So he's saying that these jury instructions of her, have a fundamentally flawed legal premise, namely that the Presidential Records Act, call that the PRA, determines whether a former president is authorized to possess highly classified documents and store them unsecured. This premise is wrong, okay? And if you're not familiar with the instructions, she basically submitted a jury instruction that said that the president has total authority to determine if any document is a personal document. And here's where a lot of confusion comes in. And you see Donald Trump going, we have the Presidential Records Act, right? We have the Presidential Records Act. Well, the Presidential Records Act really talks about like personal records. So yes, Donald Trump can have any personal records he wants, but if they are presidential records, and that's where the confusion comes in, because you hear Presidential Records Act, we have the Presidential Records Act. Well, actual presidential records are different than his personal records, okay? So moving on, the PRA should play no role in the trial. The PRA should play no role at trial at all. Moreover, it is vitally important the court promptly decide whether the unstated legal premise, and remember, that's what he's like, I want the legal premise here. You can submit this jury instruction. But this unstated legal premise, the court needs to tell us if that's what it thinks is the law. That's what this is all about. Why? Because the government must have the opportunity to consider appellate review before jeopardy attaches. And that's what I was talking about, him reaching out to the Court of Appeals and get a ruling on this. Because here's what can happen. Let's say this is Judge Cannon actually believes this is the case. Well, therefore, even if the jury doesn't agree with the instructions and Donald Trump finds him guilty, she could have a directed verdict and just be like, he's not guilty, right? And the legal basis would be the rationale under this silly jury instruction. Or, of course, the jury could just find him not guilty. And after that, jeopardy attaching is the fancy legal term. After that happens and you're found not guilty, that's it, right? Any legal fighting that happens before jeopardy attaches, that can be appealed. And even if a case is dismissed, the case could come back. But after jeopardy attaches, when the case is over in favor of the defendant, it's over, okay? Moving right along. Oh yeah, and the fancy term, so a writ of mandamus. That's we call it taking a writ on a judge and getting a higher level of court to be like, no, you can't do that. You have to do this, basically. Let's see, what else do we have here? All right, so if the court concludes that under the Espionage Act, the president is authorized, that's what he's being charged under, right? The Espionage Act. If he's authorized to possess any document that the jury says is a personal record, the consequence would wrongly present a factual determination, that would create a factual determination that should have no legal consequence, right? So in other words, the jury under the Espionage Act there's no business going, oh yeah, Trump could have just said that these classified documents are personal records. It's just they have no business doing that. The only question is, and I'll lay out the elements of the crime later in the document like Jack Smith does, but the only real question is, did the president wrongfully and willfully possess classified documents? That's the question. There is no other question of, could he have kind of in his mind or some other way flipped these classified documents and called them personal documents under the Presidential Records Act, okay? And if he could, right, and I love how he uses this term, it would give the president carte blanche, right, to remove any document from the White House at the end of the presidency, right? Honestly, how silly would that be? The president could just kind of walk out with classified documents and not have to secure them, could show them to anyone he wants. That's if what Judge Cannon is implying here is true. That's the consequence of that. All right, and so that is what I call the facts or law determination, right? A jury is a fact-finding body, right? They just kind of determine, did this happen or did it not? It's really not up to them to kind of determine kind of legal questions. That's the court's job. And so that's why Jack Smith wants clarification here, because if the judge actually believes that the president has, like he says, carte blanche to just call any document he wants a personal document, that's a problem, right? That's just a get out of jail free card, okay? Let's see. Oh, and here he kind of talks about, Trump's thing, the Presidential Record Act. He calls it a post hoc, after the fact justification that he concocted more than a year after he left the White House. Because you hear him repeat this over and over again. We have the Presidential Record Act, right? That's never been brought up in any of these legal proceedings. His lawyers, right, who are supposed to be clever people, they never brought this up because they know obviously it's ridiculous. It's fine if he wants to spoon feed that to the MAGA crowd that believes whatever he says, but as far as it being an actual legal thing, it's not. It's just something they're making up after the fact. And like Jack Smith says, and this is true, Trump has never represented to the court that he has in fact designated the classified documents as personal when they made a motion to dismiss. He did not say they were personal. And the reason for that is because he never did that in the first place. Okay? More background facts in the document. I'll just skim through that. Again, Trump did not designate the documents as personal. During its exhaustive investigation, i.e. the government's exhaustive investigation, they interviewed Trump's own PRA representatives. Not a single one had heard Trump say that he was designating the records as personal. It never happened. It's just, typical Trump making stuff up after the fact, okay? None of the representatives suggested that he ever designated these as personal. Instead, he said that they were highly confidential and remained classified, right? Because we've all heard that tape, unless you live in a bubble, where he is openly bragging about those documents being classified. And he even says, in fact, that I could have declassified them, right? Well, the implication, obviously, is that he didn't, of course, right? Let's keep moving along, and sorry for the cacophony in the background. It's the youngins playing. Trump first invented this notion February 2022, right? Because you got to remember, there was a lot of communication between the government and... Hold on a second. Guys! So, as I was saying, there was back and forth between the government and Trump's legal team, right, about giving these documents back. It wasn't like they just sprung this on him and he had nothing, oh, wow, where'd this come from? He knew they were trying to get these documents, and he was playing all kinds of games. And their point is, well, while he was playing all these games, never once did he go, oh yeah, by the way, these documents that you're coming for, they're like my personal documents. I can keep them. Never happened, right? Just post hoc rationalizations because he got caught with his pants down, all right? And nevertheless, Trump and his attorneys continued to acknowledge that the documents were presidential, not personal. Again, it gets confusing because you hear Presidential Records Act, and therefore, wait, are they presidential documents because they're classified? Again, it doesn't work that way. For example, in May 2022, Trump's attorney accepted a grand jury subpoena asking them to produce the documents. So what should he have done right then if these were Trump's personal documents? He should have sought to quash the subpoena or argue in a way that he did not have to comply because he designated the classified records as personal under the PRA. Instead, he hid most of those documents from his lawyer, made false statements to mask his continued possession of them, and attempted to enlist his lawyer in concealing or destroying the classified records. This is not up for debate, all right? This is beyond dispute. Call it TDS or whatever you want, but them's the facts, okay? We cannot discern why the plaintiff would have an individual interest or need for any of the 100 documents with classified markings. Again, this isn't like one or two documents, all right? This was 100 documents marked classified, a lot of it military stuff. And again, if you don't believe me, listen to Trump, because he's on tape talking about them being military plans. So if you think those should be in a bathroom or a closet at Mar-a-Lago, then I'm just going to assume that you don't think what Hillary Clinton did on her server was a big deal, okay? All right, so this is kind of like the elements, right, of the actual crime. An unauthorized possession of any document relating to national defense, willful retainment, right, and failure to deliver. So what does that mean, right? What if you just possessed a document and you kind of didn't know? And that's kind of why that special counsel isn't charging Joe Biden, because, you know, you kind of really have to go, oh yeah, I have these classified documents. I'm willfully keeping them, right? Well, we know Trump willfully did it. He's on tape talking about having them, right? So he can't say he didn't know that he had them. Also, they were trying to get them back, right? So that really underscores the willful aspect, because they keep asking him for the documents, and he kind of has his lawyer, he even lies to his lawyer and tries to have his lawyer kind of hide that he has the documents. So there's no question it was willful. There's no question he's in possession of them. I mean, he's on tape talking about them. It's all been photographed, when the FBI raided the place, right? So he didn't return them. Right, so all those elements are met. I mean, there's really just no question. I think the best thing he can hope for is just a big time Trumper on the jury, just hanging the jury, because this is really not a whodunit case. It's not an alibi case. He meets all the elements. So the rest of the kind of document here just kind of goes on and compares, Jack Smith's jury instructions to the court's jury instructions, and just kind of lays out how kind of silly there are. And I'll just kind of go to the end and show you one of my favorite parts here. Okay. All right. So this is what the government set out below, and it gets into the unauthorized possession. All right. The PRA defines the term personal records to mean all documentary materials or any reasonably segregable portion thereof of a purely private or non-public character, all right? And this is beyond dispute, okay? I mean, diaries, journals the president has, of course, those are personal things, right? No one's disputing that in this case, and that's not what they're saying they had. They're saying it literally had, military plans that the president might, get in a briefing or something, and he hung on to them. Presidential records do not include personal records, all right? Now, so here's just the wild LOL part, all right? This is what gets Trump off. Presidential records do not include personal records, all right? This is the LOL part of the instruction. I further instruct you that a president has unreviewable authority to designate any record whatsoever as personal, regardless of whether it meets the statutory definitions I have just provided. Further, if a president transfers records from the White House to any location other than the National Archives, he has necessarily exercised his unreviewable authority to designate those records as personal, and you may find him not guilty. Now, really digest what that's saying there. He's saying just by the very act of President Trump taking these records, regardless of whether they fall under the statute as government classified documents, the very act of him sending them anywhere other than the National Archive, which is where they were supposed to go, the very act of doing that designates them as personal, and you can find him not guilty. So this is literally like the whole case is pointless. This one instruction destroys the whole case. It would let Trump or any president take classified records and, mail them to his neighbor, mail them to anywhere, and they would instantly take them home and hide them somewhere, and they would instantly become personal records that do not fall under the Espionage Act, and he can't be prosecuted for. So it's just as silly as it gets. Again, why is Judge Cannon doing this? I think she's just looking for a reward. I honestly don't know if she cares about that much what happens to Trump, but you know that the one thing Trump does is when you're super loyal to him, he does his best to reward you, and not because he gives a damn about you, it's because of the message that sends to everybody else. Because the inverse of that is if you do anything against him, he stops at nothing to ruin your life, right? So that could also be part of the equation. Well, if I don't help him here and he's president, well, that's the end of my career. She's thinking about herself getting on the Supreme Court or, running the Justice Department. I don't ask for much here, right? I'm just trying to give free information as, someone who kind of went to law school almost for the fun of it. So I could kind of have a backstage pass into how the world works, right? And so I just kind of want to share that with you because the law is confusing and, people can be easily misled. So you want to return the favor to me. If I taught you anything, just hit the subscribe button for the sole reason that will get this video out to more people, and we can just spread the truth. Because I don't give it. I got Dwight Eisenhower on my wall. I'm not some like wokester, super liberal, person, but I just do believe that there's value in truth. And like I've said in my other videos, which I hope you watch, I've been following politics since the 80s, and I've never seen someone just spend all this time trying to make one side of the country hate the other, and right there, that's all I need to just have someone disqualified. And I hope that whatever happens to Trump, that Trumpism, that the post-fact divide the country stuff, I hope that dies quickly, because we won't survive as a nation like that. I just saw a quote from Aldous Huxley. I put it on my Twitter if you want to see it, and it says, "Propaganda is simply designed to make one set of people think that there's other sets of people that aren't human." And I feel like that's all Trump is doing. That's all the Fox, the Newsmax, and all that. All that propaganda is designed, if you're following it, is to just turn the other people into less than human. And our nation can't survive that way. And I'm sorry to end on like a dismal note, but it is what it is. If you want me to cover other stuff, throw it in the comments. All right, lawyer time's over.